Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider, brought to you, and this is going to freak you right out, it's by Vanishing, isn't it? My guest today is a highly decorated math nerd. He's worked for the NSA, and this is impressive. Reader's Digest called him America's Best Math Whiz in 2005. His corporate clients include Google, Amazon, Stanford, Boeing, and more. He's presented his unique blend of math and magic for thousands of people all over the world. It's Arthur Benjamin, the Mathemagician. Art, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. What's your magic origin story? You've got 27 seconds.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I did magic shows for children's birthday parties, like many did. I was the Great Benjamini, magical fun for a very low fee. And those years, the high school years of doing magic was a very important part of my life. I think a lot of what I learned about teaching, I'm a professor of mathematics, has everything to do with what I learned on how to entertain 5-year-olds for 30 minutes. Right? You learn so much about presenting. I mean, you learn that you need audience participation. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. It's humor is important. Having an arc to your story, punchlines, all that I learned from entertaining kids with magic, and that has had paid dividends many times over in my life, both as a magician and a professor and a lecturer and an author. So I'm very grateful to magic.
Now, you met James Randi at a magic convention, and it kind of changed your life. What was the convention, and can you tell us a bit about your relationship with him?
It was the IBM annual convention that happened to be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1980 or 81. I don't remember which. Okay. And I was just starting to come out with my math magic show, and I was getting a lot of support from the magicians in the Pittsburgh area. I went to college at Carnegie Mellon University out there, and there was a magician there who saw it, says, "Oh my gosh, Randi has to see this." And I got very nervous because Randi, I'd read some of his comments, and he didn't hold back. He didn't suffer fools gladly. He was very negative. He had an image of somebody who says, "You can't do this. You can't." Very skeptical. And so somebody arranges for me to show my stuff to Randi, and he looks at me and he goes, and he's trying to figure out, am I cheating or am I legitimate? And he then asks me some, what I would call as sort of combination of magic and logic problems to see if I could answer those. He said, if this guy really can do these calculations, he's probably pretty smart. So I'm going to ask him some questions that a smart magician should know. And I answered them, and he then relaxed because he says, I think he really is doing what he's doing. And I said, sure, let me show you. And I pull out paper and I give him all examples. And he then got very excited because Randi had spent his career as a debunker, as exposing fraudulent psychics and such, and so he was always put in a position where he had to be sort of being negative about people, and he asked if I would be willing to go to some of his performances and TV appearances as an example of something positive. So instead of him saying you can't, he said, but here's someone who can. And he's not claiming supernatural mumbo jumbo to explain all this. And I don't think without Randi I would have really developed. I mean, he got me into. I was on one of his television specials. I was featured in an article in Discover magazine and Omni magazine, and he made all kinds of great connections for me early in my career, in my 20s. And I don't think I'd be where I am today were it not for the amazing influence of Randi.
And did he
also? I share an interest with him about skepticism and stuff. In
yes.
fact, he also. I was transitioning from doing magic, birthday parties and such, to doing mentalism, and the math stuff was merely it was sort of like, I wanted to present myself as someone with an amazing mind, but the math stuff was for the most part legit, and he, as did a few other magicians, encouraged me to put the mentalism aside. He says, look, better that you can explain to the audience how you're doing it and what you're doing than have half of your show devoted to things that you really can't explain because you're cheating in a bad way, right? And so though I still love reading and learning about mentalism, I still love reading and learning about magic. I don't perform. I don't want to hurt science by trying to convince people that pseudoscience exists. I want to be a responsible scientist. I want to So I want to show the power of mathematics, the power of science, and not
power of thumb writers.
Claim. Exactly.
Now, did Randy introduce you to skepticism during that time, or was it something you were already involved in? Because you were a member of the Southern Californian Skeptics, weren't you? Yeah,
and but he had me perform at these PsyCop conferences, Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, in New York. I remember going to Buffalo, New York, where I shared a room with Steve Shaw, otherwise known as Banachek. And we got to know each other. We're about the same age. And I am trying to remember. I think it was because of Randy that I got much more into skepticism than I think beforehand. I think I was more open to the idea of ESP and such.
Sure. Well, they all put out quite a convincing argument until Randy came and pulled the rug from under their feet.
I think.
So with the mathematics, what's the most difficult stunt in your act? Is stunt the right word? Sorry, I don't mean to demean it. Effects, piece,
whatever.
routine.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I do in my show, where I mentally square a 5-digit number, or if I'm feeling ambitious, multiply 2 different 5-digit numbers, that really does require my full attention. You are hearing my thoughts out loud. I'm explaining what I'm doing, but you're really hearing what's going on in my brain. And that definitely is the hardest thing that I do.
Does the narration make it more difficult?
The only time that I ever mentally multiply 5-digit numbers is when I'm in front of an audience. I'm not doing this as so I think it would actually be harder for me if you said, I'm going to give you a problem and I just want you to shut up and don't move and just give me the answer when you're done. And I'm just so used to moving around and waving my arms and talking out loud that I think the narration is now almost an instrumental part of the problem solving. So,
right. Yeah. I was just a personal question because I'm interested. I was watching we'll talk about TED in a little bit, but I was watching one of the earlier TED Talks this morning that was showing you doing that and starting with 2 and working up to the 5. With the early ones, the 2s and the 3s and the 2s and the 4-digit numbers, it seemed that you were doing it instantly. Do you actually know the answers to all those things squared by rote, or are you doing a calculation?
The 2-digit squares have become unintentionally memorized. I mean, I've been squaring 2-digit numbers since I was 13 years old, and I just know them. The 3-digit numbers, except for a dozen of them that people call out a lot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 6, 6, except for a handful of those, I'm actually calculating them. On the other hand, I've done them so many times that I may have a feel if I'm wrong. Like I might go, oh, that doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? It's not that I know what the answer is, but that just that seems wrong. You know, give just for once, give me a 3-digit number, and I'll square it, and I'll just because I
972.
should. It's 944,784.
See,
Now
that
that
feels
is
like
not.
you just know it. That feels
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
just know it. It's too
And
quick.
yet, and yet. All right, so let's put context here. First of all, I'm doing my calculation from left to right.
Okay.
Which means I can start to say my answer while I'm calculating the rest of the answer.
No, that's not
Right?
right, Art.
But and it was the magician in me that's probably why I did it left to right in the first place, was to give the illusion that I had it instantaneously because I could start writing it down or saying the answer right away. Okay. Now, in the problem you gave me, all right, I won't go into all the little details here, though I'm happy to show people in person. When you said 972 squared, I did 1,000 times 944 as my first step. Literally, I went up 28 and down 28 and got 1,000 times 944. Now, you can do that, right? What's 944 times 1,000? You can just say it. 944,000, which was what I said. Add to that the square of 28. I went up and down 28. And I told you I do know 28 squared. It's 784. So I said 944,784. So it seemed instantaneous, but it was as quick as me getting to that 944. So anyway, that's
so cool.
revealing a little bit of the magic behind it. But that's but it wasn't memory. Cool. It is, and when I do a 4-digit number, I say the millions pretty quickly, but I still have a good chunk of the problem to still do after I say the millions. I then have to do the thousands and the hundreds and so on.
But I guess in some ways, say the number of syllables with the bigger and the million is giving you those fractions of seconds. That is actually all you need to be able to do the rest of the sum.
And I can say those millions and thousands as quickly or slowly as I need to.
Yeah. It's almost like being one ahead.
Yeah. And that's right, it is. And pausing is okay. It adds to the drama.
Sure.
One question I have, for me, had to deal with as a performer is, do I ever do intentional mistakes? Right? And the answer is I do not, because I do just naturally occasionally make mistakes, just like any magician occasionally, the classic.
Yeah, but a juggler will often mess up on the finale with the 9 pulls, will deliberately.
And I've had magicians say, you have to mess up before the last thing, because only in that way does the audience truly appreciate how difficult it was. And so I for a time I thought I remember many years ago I performed it was a Tannen's Magic Jubilee, and I did 4 shows, and in 2 of the shows I got the answer right away, and in 2 of the shows I first made a mistake and then got it. And it was all unintentional, the mistakes. But in the 2 where I messed up and then got it, the reaction from the audience was bigger. And I remember one of the magicians say, you have to drop that ball before you do it, because it will lead to a bigger reaction. So I'm still kind of an honest person, and I don't like to, I do like to do everything honestly. So I don't make the mistakes, but I can it's an issue that I've wondered about as a performer.
Yeah. What's an example of something in your act that looks hard but is actually very easy?
So let's see. There probably something I do near the beginning of the show, where I'll take a random number from my board of numbers. So other numbers have been called out in the show. I'll take one. Let's just use the number 3456. And if you have a calculator, bring it out. All right? Or if you don't, I can talk through it.
Yeah,
but
no, my phone's on the calculator, so yeah.
Okay, well then you would take 3456. I'd have you multiply it by any 3-digit number, giving probably a 7-digit answer. I'll have you call out 6 of those 7 digits in any order, and I'll tell you which number was left out.
My wife's got one. I want to do this.
Okay?
Yeah. I was thinking of my phone. So what, I'd need to do 3456.
Take 3456.
Uh-huh.
Multiply that by any 3-digit number. Don't tell me what it is. You should have either a 6-digit or 7-digit answer. How many digits in your answer there?
6.
6. Okay. What I want you to do is to call out for me any 5 of those 6 digits, any 5 of them, in any order you'd like, 1 digit at a time. I will try and determine the digit you've left out. So go
Any
ahead.
5 in any order.
Any 5 in any order, right?
0, 0, 1, 1, 2.
Did you leave out the number 5?
Aww. Yes,
Now,
yes, I did.
Of course you did. Now, of course, and as I'll explain at the session, it's something very easy to do, and there are a lot of presentational nuances involved.
That's easy.
But it is easy to do, and it's more effective if you've already done some other impressive mental calculations. If a magician just opens with that trick, the audience is going to say, what's the trick here? But if you've already done some pretty impressive things, they're going to add that, and they're going to say, oh, that was even more impressive. We called out those numbers in any order. Oh my God, and so there's a timing aspect.
So your placement is very specific. Your placement
I think
of that.
Very important. I agree.
Interesting. Do you use much mnemonics in your act? And if so, which system do you recommend?
So I learned when I was in high school, I read a book called The Memory Book by Harry Lorraine and Jerry Lucas. And there I was introduced to a system called which he didn't call it that, but it's historically called the major system, which is a phonetic code where every digit it gets a consonant sound. So the 1 is a T or D sound, 2 is an N sound, 3 is an M sound, and so on. And you can use this to turn numbers into words. And so, for example, the first 5 digits of pi, with 31415 has consonants MTRTL, and that becomes my turtle. Right. So you could turn a credit card into 4 words. You can and once upon a time when I would do memory demonstrations as part of my show, I would do that. I'd have somebody call out 20 numbers, 20 digits, and I would give it back to them. I use it internally when my mental calculation problems get very large. So when I do when I'm mentally squaring a 4-digit number, at one point I have to hold on to a 3-digit number, and I have to hold on to it long enough that I have to turn it into a word, and it sits there as a word, and then later on, many seconds later, I retrieve that word and turn it back into a number. When I do my grand finale of squaring or multiplying 2 5-digit numbers, you are hearing those words in the calculation if you've seen, for example, my TED Talk, and that's nothing more and nothing less than the phonetic code of that's fun. I mean, I use it all the time outside of performing. I use it for memorizing phone numbers, credit card numbers, birth dates. It's fun. Yeah, everyone should learn it. Again, and that's something something you can learn from magic that will serve you the rest of your life.
Yes. What in the pre-show we touched briefly on the Magic Square, but what's your favorite way to present the Magic Square?
I use a method of my own, which I'll talk about at the session, which is a customizable, personalizable magic square. Instead of asking an audience member for some random 2-digit number, which probably has no meaning to them, I ask for their birth date. I bring
Okay.
somebody, usually a youngish person, up to the stage, and I ask them for their birth date, the month, and the date, and the year, and that goes in the top row of the magic square. And then I build a magic square around that. And so this is a square based on their birthday. It's got their name on it. I sign it at the bottom. These people hold on to these things for a long time, and it's not so hard to do. So that's the method I like to do, and it makes it more personal.
Yeah, no, it normally is just a random number, and giving it that. It's Vernon's thing about an emotional hook, isn't it? If it's their numbers, then they're going to be more invested in the outcome.
That's
really
right.
smart.
That's right. It's a difference between naming a card or giving them some information about themselves, like their birthday.
Yeah.
Another thing I do in my show is I'll tell people the day of the week they were born on. If Damien, if you're willing, what year were you born?
1971.
And what month?
November.
November what?
27th.
27th was a Saturday, and so if you can tell somebody something about themselves, maybe they don't even know that.
Yeah.
If you doubt me, you could Google it later. But that's more exciting to them than some naming a card that they thought of. Well, that card they thought of probably didn't have any personal connection to them.
Yeah.
So it's the emotional hook, as you said, as Dave Vernon said.
Indeed. Now, we had to touch on the TED Talks, and you're quite a darling with them. And the one that I watched this morning had 10 million views now. How did you first get involved with them, and how do you work out what to talk about? Do they give you suggestions? Do you give them? What's the process?
I've done 3 TED Talks that have collectively, I don't know how, somehow over 50 million views. And the TED Talk process has changed over the years. So the first one I did was 2005, and I got up there, and they had almost no idea what I was going to be doing on that stage. They didn't even know where I was coming from. I was in my seat in the audience, walked up, did my thing.
Oh my gosh.
And this was, but at the time, these were presented exclusively for the 900 people or so who paid thousands of dollars to hear amazing talks from amazing different speakers. But they did start gradually putting them online. And so I presented in 2005, and then it got put up online in end of 2007, beginning of 2008, and it went viral and changed my life. I mean, I went from doing about 40 presentations a year, mostly local ones, to 80 a year, mostly out of town and international. And, just a total game changer. Once they went online, they got very much more tightly controlling how they do. So when I pitched my second idea, which was just a 3-minute talk about the value of learning statistics versus calculus, not the most exciting topic, you might say, but again, millions and millions of people view it, and it's an important part of mathematics education. Why do we have to put students all the way towards a subject that they're never going to use in real life versus one that they could and should use on a daily basis? And but they wanted to hear the talk before they approved it, and then I had to rehearse it once, and it was a much bigger process. That was 2009. Then in 2012, I did my last TED Talk, and it was up in Edinburgh, Scotland, when I was on sabbatical in Oxford, and I talked about the magic of math and Fibonacci numbers, and boy, I had to rehearse that multiple times. They got involved in the creation of the slides. They wanted a
Oh,
specific
right.
image. Oh yes, it was very
Proper
much.
machine.
I watched somebody during their dress rehearsal, and they went off topic and did something that wasn't in the script, and they got a little bit of heat from that. They said, "You didn't. This is not in our notes. You are not going to be given extra time on stage to present this." I mean, it was like television.
Oh,
You
right.
just had
Yeah.
to. It was very carefully coordinated, and I will say, when I did my first presentation, which was basically a portion of my show. I did it for the hundreds of people in front of me, and it was exciting, but that was it. After that, and after it had been viewed millions of times, when I had to do my little 3-minute pitch on statistics, I got up there, and within 30 seconds, my legs were shaking. You can't tell from the video, but I'm never shaking up there. And I was like, oh my God, my body knows that this is not just for those hundreds of people in front of me.
Yeah.
This is for ultimately millions of people. And then the third time, I rehearsed the darn thing so often, I wasn't going to be shaking. Even during the rehearsal, I wasn't shaking. But when I got up there about halfway through the talk, my leg starts to shake. It's like, oh, damn you. I thought I had this so well rehearsed I wasn't going to get. But the part of my brain says, no, this is big. This is important.
Yeah.
You're going to want to
Yeah.
do this right. So anyway, the first time, as far as getting on TED, the person who was sort of the head of TED, Chris Anderson, actually saw me at a conference called the Gathering for Gardner.
Yeah.
Which is where magicians
Gardner,
and mathematicians and puzzle makers and skeptics all get together. And I just feel at home with all these people, and I've gone to a number of these events. He saw me talk about Fibonacci numbers, of all things, at one of these, and wanted me to speak at a TED Talk. And again, it was indirectly because a couple of other people who knew me recommended me, including someone that indirectly came by way of Randi, just to bring this full
Right.
circle,
Yeah.
was that this happened. And I, in my mind, he said, well, you can talk about whatever you want. They would never say it now, but that Fibonacci thing you talked about was just so beautiful. And I said, yeah, but in my head, if I'm gonna do something for the prestigious audience, I'm not gonna do something I've spoken about dozens of times. You're gonna see something I've done hundreds, thousands of times, right? And I'm glad I did. So, but anyway, it was because of that I got invited to perform the first time. And then after that, I was able to reach out to some people within the TED organization and say, here, I've got an idea for this. And they were receptive to it, and it just happened.
Sure. Talking of Fibonacci and interesting numbers, I saw in my research that you had a paper on Benford's Law. Now, Can you explain to a non-mathematician what that is and why it's interesting?
So if I'm in front of a large audience, I will ask the audience, how many people have a think of your home address, the street address, the number on your address, right? Now, that first digit of your address could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And you might imagine that those numbers are about equally distributed. There'll be about as many people who start with a 3 as people who start with a 7. And yet, there is a ginormous number of people whose addresses will begin with the lower digits. That is, if you ask an audience, next time you're an audience and say, something strange is going on out there, you say about 2/3 of the ask how many people have an address that begin with a 1, 2, or 3, and ask and right by a show of hands, then ask them how many begin with a 7, 8, or 9, and there will be literally 2 to 3 times as many who start with a 1, 2, or 3 than start with a 7, 8, or 9. Now, this is also this phenomenon known as Benford's law occurs not just with things like street addresses, but also things like if you opened up a star chart and looked at distances to galaxies, whether those distances are measured in miles or meters or light years, 30% of the distances will begin with the digit 1. And only about 5% will begin with the digit 9. If you look at an almanac of rivers in the world, again, whether those rivers are measured in feet or miles or meters, kilometers, you will have about 30% that will begin with 1 and about 5% that will begin with 9. And it sort of slides down logarithmically from the first to the last. It works on just about anything where the numbers span several orders of magnitude. So in rivers, you could have a river whose number of miles is 1 digit long or 2 digit long or 3 digits long. It's not going to work with something like height. If you ask people to give us their height in inches or centimeters, it's only going to be, they're all going to be like
there's no variance at the beginning.
That's right. Everyone's height in inches will be somewhere between 4 and 7 in terms of what that number of inches they are. So that's not going to obey Benford's law. But you take just about anything else. And it's pretty amazing. It's provably true with mathematical sequences. For example, if you take the first 10,000 Fibonacci numbers, 30%, actually 30.1%, the number predicted by Benford's law will begin with the digit 1. And something like 17.5% will begin with the digit 2 as predicted by Benford's law. Whether you look at the first 10,000 Fibonacci numbers or the first million powers of 2, or it works. And there's good mathematical reasons for that. People still aren't completely sure why it always works with things like street addresses and such, but it's fascinating. And it's one of the things I like to talk about to get people excited about mathematics. I mean, I've used magic in my 30-some years as a professor to try and get people excited about mathematics. And I'm grateful to magic for giving me the tools to present mathematics in a magical way. So once again, I am grateful to magic for all that it's done in my life.
Now, one thing, this is going to be a segue and a half. Are you ready? One thing that magic's done for you is going to bring you to London in January to perform at the Session. Now,
what?
Can you talk, smooth, hey? Can you talk about what you're going to be performing and sharing? Because I understand you're going to be doing a lecture and the gala show, right?
It'll be a show and tell. So in the gala show, I will do my show. I will demonstrate what I perform for audiences all over the world, and it's I hope very entertaining. And then in the session that will come after the show, so I have asked that my performance piece come before the session piece, because I want to
show
be able
before
to
you
explain. Yeah, exactly.
It's not called tell and show, is it? Come on.
No, right? It's Penn and Teller. The telling comes after the opening, right? So, anyway, so and then in the session, I will go into really just the details about everything, both from how to do mental arithmetic really quickly, focusing on the stuff that really you can practically learn without too much terrible time and practice, and then but as well as at least one way of creating the magic square. I'll show my method for creating the birthday magic square. I will how to do the missing digit thing that I demonstrated earlier, and just be there to answer questions about anything. So I love hanging out with magicians, and this when I saw about the session, I'm on a world tour right now with my wife on a year-long sabbatical, and we are visiting 30 different countries from over the next. We're 2.5 months in. So over the next 9 months, we will be visiting another 20 countries or so. And by the way, anybody who watches this and listens to this, and if you are listening to this and you are from South Africa or India or Singapore or Thailand or Indonesia or Japan, please reach out to me, because I will be out there in February through May. And I would love to do lecture at your institution. So
there we go. We do. Because I can see on the stats of where people are that download the audio version. YouTube don't give me the stats of where people are specifically, but I can, and they are in all of those places. We've got listeners in the most peculiar, sometimes a couple of places I had to look up because I've never even heard of, but it is all around the world. So and is serious listeners, if you are there and you've got a magic club, reach out. Now the other person that's going to be at the session is Dr. Matt Baker. Now,
wonderful.
He also is maths and magic. So what I'm going to propose to Andy and Joss is a new event for the session this year, which is a maths cage fight, because I don't think there's room for two math-based magicians in the world. So there's going to be one winner. It's going to be a fight to the death. Are you okay with that?
That's right. Yeah. Tell Matt Baker I've got his number. We're gonna square off, baby, and this is gonna be. Someone's gonna be going to zero, man. I tell you, we're gonna be.
I'll get him to do some smack talk as well, and that's exactly. That's the trailer for the session. Everybody will be coming. Now, you've not been before, but one of the things that I think makes the session different is that it's not huge. It's a smaller convention, and there isn't much else, to be honest with you, much else to do around the location of the hotel. So everybody tends to hang out all the time there. Are you going to be? Are you a hanging out kind of guy?
Of course,
are you happy for people to come up and ask you questions? And
I'm a talker. Just come by. I'll share anything. This is what I'm doing it for. I said to Andy, this sounds like a fun place to be. I'm as interested in hanging out and learning. Spending time with Matt Baker will be great. We only get to see each other once or twice a year at mathematics conventions. It'll be great to be able to see each other at a magicians conventions. Yeah.
Well, I very much look forward to it. But we are out of time. We always end the show with 4 quick fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Favorite movie?
When I was in high school, it was the musical Hair.
Favorite pizza topping?
Pepperoni and onions.
Favorite person or people who make music?
Stephen Sondheim.
And finally, who would you rather fight, one massive Josh or 100 tiny Andys?
Oh, man, I'll go with 100 tiny Andys. That sounds like fun.
Perfect. Art Benjamin, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I really appreciate it, and I look very much forward to seeing you in January in London at the session.
Absolutely. All right, wonderful.